Hi, and welcome back. It's 2021, and this is the first Freight Broker Bootcamp Live of the year. So I want to welcome you. If you're catching this on replay, hit me up in the chat box and let me know with hashtag replay. I'd love to hear from you. And if you're joining me live, that's amazing. Totally appreciate you being here. It's a new year. I'm excited. I hope you're excited. And so today I've decided that rather than taking on a topic or training on a specific topic today, I'm going to dedicate all of the time to you and answering your questions. Now, I can't promise that I'm going to get to everybody's question today, but I will try to come back in later and answer those questions either through private message or through the thread, whether that be on YouTube or Facebook or wherever you're checking this out. So I'm excited that you're here. And I'm excited that it's a new year. It's been a crazy year, 2020. I don't think anybody could argue with the fact that it's been pretty crazy. And I'm looking forward to a really exciting 2021, and I hope you are as well. I hope that's the year that you're able to launch your freight brokerage or freight agency. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Dennis Brown. I've been an entrepreneur for over 25 years, built 3 multi-million-dollar companies. In 2003, I launched a logistics company, went on to grow that company to over $80 million a year in sales, and later sold that company. But I also have owned a program called Freight Broker Bootcamp. I launched that over a decade ago. And since then, we've trained over 8,000 students, teaching them how to launch and start their own freight brokerage or freight agency. So if you're curious about that, check out freightbrokerbootcamp.com. So, excuse me. So today we're going to do live Q&A. But before we dive into that, we got a bunch of people that are getting live. Hit me up in the chat box. Let me know the city and state that you're logging in from. I'm in the Buffalo, New York area, specifically Clarence, New York, born and raised in Western New York. Usually we've got a couple of people here from Western New York, but we usually have people from all over the world: Canada, Central America, Australia, the UK, Eurasia, and of course, tons of locations throughout the US, California, Texas, Florida. So hit me up in the chat box. Let me know where you're logging in from, and I'll try to give you a quick shout out. So here they come. Susie Collins, welcome from Brookville, PA. Scott from Ukraine. Scott's from the Ukraine. Yes, Scott's here almost every week. Welcome. Let me scroll through here real quick. I don't want to miss anybody. All right. So we got Alicia from Atlanta. We got Shanika from Chicago. We've got Vova from Atlanta, Georgia. We got Chantel from Dallas, Texas, one of my favorite cities. We got Janetta from Battle Creek, Michigan. We got Cindy Kane, once again, as always, from Houston, Texas. We have Corey from Asheville, North Carolina. We've got Shika from Atlanta, Georgia. We've got Brandon from Somerville, Alabama. We've got Michelle Wright from Detroit, Michigan. Brooke from PA. Zach from Dallas again. We got another person from Dallas. We got Jordy from Bensonville, Illinois. Teresa from Bowie, Maryland. Harris from Toronto. We got Consuelo from Atlanta. We got Robert from Laredo. We got Edna Lucas from Chicago, Illinois. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Robert from Wichita, Kansas. Welcome, Priscilla from Sac, California. Yeah, I guess that's it. If I don't pronounce your name correctly or your city, state, I apologize. We got Brian from Kitchener, Ontario. Latoya from Dallas. Man, Dallas is in the house today. We got Jamal from Fayetteville, North Carolina. James from Sawtee, Georgia. Casey. Welcome, Casey. I'm not sure where you're from, but welcome. Asim from Pakistan. Jeez, we got people from Pakistan. That's awesome. Welcome to the stream, Asim. We got Nicole from Rome, Georgia. We got Zach. We got Kevin from Texas. We got Bad One from Glendale, California. Bad One in the house. Ashanti from Union, New Jersey. We got Andre from Milwaukee. Edward. We got Casey from Pasadena. We got Larry from Plano. Man, we got people from all over the place. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm not going to get to all of you, but I truly appreciate you being here today. And I hope I can bring you some value, because my goal today is to spend all of this live on you, answering your questions. Now, there's 2 ways that you and the audience can benefit from this Freight Broker Bootcamp Live. One is you can ask questions. Okay. And we're going to get to that in a minute. So you can ask questions that have been either preventing you or holding you back from starting your business or growing your business. The second way you can benefit is by listening to the answers of the questions of other people that are in this stream. One of my favorite ways to learn in a group environment like this, and one of the most powerful ways to learn, is to listen to the questions that other people are asking and the answers associated with that, because now you get to learn in advance. A lot of times, you don't know all the questions you need to ask. You don't know the questions that you should be asking. But in a group like this, where we might have 50 or 100 or a couple hundred people live, I don't know how many people are live. You might have a couple hundred people live on this Freight Broker Bootcamp live Q&A. You get the benefit of group questioning. You get everybody's minds, and and it's that old adage, right? I'd rather have 10 minds than one mind, right? We have all of those questions. And so it gives you the opportunity to learn in advance. And so I'm excited that you're here. I appreciate that you're here. Really quick, before we go forward with the Q&A, let me know from the students that are out there. Hit me up if you're already a student of Freight Broker Bootcamp and you've already enrolled in the Freight Broker Bootcamp online training program. Hit me up with #student. Let me know, and I want to give you a little bit of love, and I want to let everybody know. Obviously, there are a lot of people that have went through my program. Many of the people that are probably live on this stream are students, although this is a free online live streaming. You didn't have to pay to get here. And I do these every single week for free. So the price of admission is, make sure that you like this stream right now. Hit the like button, whether you be on YouTube or Facebook, and then share the stream. Click the share button and share. It costs you absolutely nothing. It helps other people. It helps my channel. It helps my program, and it helps other people gather information that are curious about pursuing their dream as a freight broker or freight agent. So we got a bunch of students here, as you can see. Jeez, oh my gosh. Oh my God. We've got American Maverick student, Edna student, Nicole. We've got Ashanti. We've got Susie. We've got Trina. We've got Priscilla, all students. Mark's a student. We got Sam's a student. SLD's a student. Cindy Kane, Zach Oliver, Ernest, Teresa. These are all people that are already enrolled in Freight Broker Bootcamp. So if you're curious about becoming a freight broker and you think you need some training, you might want to check it out. I think, my training is well known to be one of the most comprehensive and cost-effective online training programs. And you can see it witnessed here with everybody that's joining in the live stream today. So let's get into some questions. This is what you're here for. So we're going to do one question at a time. You can type your chat question in the box, and I will try to answer it. I will not get to all the questions today. I promise you, I won't get to them all. But I am going to try to get the questions that I think are very relevant to the audience where it is today. The majority of the people in the audience today are people that are either just, maybe you're a truck driver who's thinking about starting a freight brokerage. Maybe you're the spouse of a truck driver who wants to help support your husband or wife or your spouse and start running a brokerage to supplement their income. Maybe you work inside of logistics, whether that be for a carrier or broker, and you want to go out on your own, or maybe you're just someone who's looking for a business. You're entrepreneurial and you want to start a business. Typically one of those. So this is typically much more of a startup type audience. So I'm going to try to cater the questions more to them, but I will answer a variety of different questions, and excuse me, we might as well answer those questions. All right, so here we go. So Scott Armstrong has a question. OS&D, overage, shortage, and damage. Can you explain what role a broker plays in that process and how it complicates the billing of shippers and paying of carriers? Okay, Scott, so you run into this. You will run into this. You will run into this, right? So overage, shortage, and damage. So this comes down to, let's say, for example, you have a truckload shipment, it gets picked up and it says there's a, a piece count of 100 pieces, just for easy math, right? And it gets delivered to the other end. And on the other end, when the bill of lading is signed, it shows there's only 90 pieces. I'm just using easy math. So it shows there's a shortage, right? Or let's say, for example, 10 of those pieces were damaged. Okay. Now, at that point, typically what's going to end up happening is there's going to be a claim of some sort, right? So whoever this bill of lading is running under, who owns this freight and has possession of this freight, is going to probably file some sort of a claim. Now, if you, as a broker, just so you have to understand, very important that you understand up front, brokers are not liable for freight claims. They are not the primary, they do not hold primary liability for freight claims. Carriers have the primary liability for freight claims because a broker actually doesn't own the freight. They didn't make it, they didn't buy it, and they actually didn't even transport it. It's the carrier of record on the bill of lading that actually is liable from a cargo perspective and from a cargo insurance perspective. So when a shipper loads a truck, the driver signs that bill of lading, and at that point, he has taken ownership and possession and responsibility of that freight. And when it goes to the other end, that receiver needs to sign that as a clean bill of lading. And if he doesn't sign it as a clean bill of lading, then that carrier is now liable. So as a broker, you have very little that you have control over when it comes to a claim. Your objective is to help just simply facilitate the claim. Now, there is contingent cargo insurance, but that typically, in most cases, contingent cargo insurance is more of a marketing tool than it is an actual risk proposition, a risk tool. If a primary cargo insurance from a carrier is not going to cover the claim, then typically contingent cargo is not going to cover it either. It's kind of a running joke in the industry that contingent cargo is really almost useless, but people require it. So, brokers buy it. But ultimately, all you can really do is try to help facilitate the exchange of information between the shipper that's filing the claim and the carrier and their insurance companies. You shouldn't file the claim on their behalf. You shouldn't subrogate the claim where the claim is coming to you and you're taking responsibility for it. You should simply try to facilitate the information in between. And so, that's a little bit about how claims work, particularly from a brokerage perspective. I hope that it answers your question. I'm sure that we could really go down a rabbit hole into a million different examples, but I think that gives you a bit of a framework on basic understanding of how claims work between shippers, brokers, and carriers. So hope that helps. Good question. Thank you. Congrats, American Maverick. I see he started his brokerage shortly after getting my program, American Maverick Logistics. Congratulations. All right, I'm scrolling through the questions here. Just give me a minute. There's a ton of questions, as you can see. All right, so here's a question from Sean Lemansky. He asks, how would you quote a truckload shipment that has multiple pickups before the ultimate destination? Good question. So when you are doing a multi-pick or multi-drop load, you do have to take into consideration variables like how many miles, how many picks or drops. You have to take into consideration any sort of delays. You have to take into consideration how long is that freight going to be on the truck, right? If you have a one pick, one drop load that's going to pick up and drop the same day, it's going to be, in many cases, it's going to be a different price. The carrier is going to charge you a different price than if it's a one pick, one drop that drops off the next day, especially if it's late in the afternoon, because that's going to impact their ability to get reloaded. So typically you're going to look at miles just like you would in a normal truckload quote. So if it were 1,000 miles and it had 2 pickups, right? You're going to charge them for each pickup location. You're going to add some additional costs for each pickup location. You might add an additional $50 or $100 for the pickup, each pickup. So if you have, an extra pickup, if normally one pick, one drop, and you're adding one, you might add $50 or $100 to the quote. But ultimately, it shouldn't change the quote dramatically, but you need to accommodate the driver for that additional time, because they're going to charge you for additional pickups. So in a lot of cases, that might be just a straight pass through, or you might have a little bit of margin on it for your time, but you're really going to focus on the number of picks. You're going to add a little bit of an incremental charge. And then you can also, obviously you're going to focus on the miles, right? Which is going to be some sort of a, heavily based on mileage. So if it's 1,000-mile load, and the average rate for that, or the going rate for that to a truck is $1,500, or is $1.50 all in. That's $1,500 to the truck. You're going to have to add some margin on top of that, obviously, which, let's say you add $250 in margin. That'd be $1,750. And then if you're going to add for an extra stop charge, you're going to add an extra $50 or $100. It would be somewhere between $1,800 and $1,850. That's just an example of how you might price a multi-pick or a multi-drop load. So hope that helps. And it works the same way on multi-pick or multi-drop. Now, multi-pick and multi-drop can be a great place to start supporting and servicing customers, because in most cases, a lot of brokers avoid that because of complications, right? If they get delayed at a pickup location, then it might affect a future appointment on another pickup or on another delivery. So you have to really pay close attention. But a lot of brokers avoid multi-pick, multi-drop loads. They're just kind of lazy and they want one pick, one drop. But be careful with trying to do too many picks or too many drops, because invariably something can go wrong and it's going to cause, a ripple effect. If that first pickup or second pickup doesn't happen on time or is delayed, then all of a sudden it has a ripple effect throughout that entire load and could cause you significant issues with getting that load delivered on time. So just a couple of word to the wise. All right, so here's an interesting question. American Maverick asks, good morning, Dennis. My question is, how can I establish myself as an expert in the reefer sector for when I'm prospecting potential customers? All right, so establishing yourself as an expert has many variables built into it. One of them is proficiency. The most important thing that you can do is become proficient at your skill, at your trade. So if you want to be known as the reefer guy, the reefer expert, you have to become a student of that niche. And so you need to learn as much as you can in theory around that, but then you also need to demonstrate that in actual performance, right? So, I'm not a big believer in fake it till you make it, right? I'm not a big believer in fake it till you make it, but you do need to become proficient. That means you need to become proficient in all the nuances of refrigerated freight. You need to develop a network of carriers. In the reefer industry, you need to understand pricing. You need to understand trends associated with that. And that's an ongoing and continuing education. So that's part one. Part two, how can you build credibility in that space? There's a couple of ways you can do that are easy. One is the best way. There's an old saying, when you say it about yourself, it's bragging. But when somebody else says it about you, it's proof. So what you want to do is you want to get third-party validation. And the way you do that, a couple of ways you can do that is you can use testimonials. You can use written or video testimonials from whether that be carriers, whether that be shippers, whether that be other industry experts, whether that be people that have influence within the industry. Have them call you an expert. Have them testify to the fact that you know what you're talking about and that that you are an expert in your game, right? Whatever that game is. And so, that third-party proof is great validation and can be leveraged heavily to build credibility, which positions you as that expert. A couple other ways you can do it. You could start talking about your niche, about your expertise. Perfect example. What am I doing now? I'm doing a Freight Broker Bootcamp live. I'm doing a Facebook, YouTube streaming live. I'm talking about the thing that I'm proficient at. I'm talking about the thing that people consider me an expert in, right? And the way that happens, it didn't happen day one, but I use this platform as a way to position my expertise and to help support other people using that expertise. So you can start talking about your niche, whether that be in a video format like YouTube, whether that be in a live format like Facebook Live, whether that be in a written format. Start writing articles for trade journals. Imagine if you were a writer for Inbound Logistics, or you were a writer for one of the major, logistics trade magazines. Imagine if you an article got published that you wrote, or an article was written about you. Another way to do it is, another great way to start talking and building credibility and building an audience in your niche is to start a podcast. So I started a podcast a couple of years ago. It's called Growth Experts. It's not specifically about logistics. It's more about growth, marketing, sales, and entrepreneurship. I've had that podcast for a couple of years now. 2008. So what is it? I think it's 3 years we're going on now. And so we've published like 300 episodes of that. I interview people from, other experts, and I also demonstrate and share my own expertise. So what you need to start doing is what I'm really talking about is content creation and distribution, where you start positioning yourself as an expert. So those are a few things you can do. 1, become proficient. 2, get testimonials and recommendations from other people, have other people say it about you. And then the 3rd is start creating content around your niche and positioning yourself as an influencer in that niche. So those are a few things that you can do. Those are a few things that I did. I can tell you in my brokerage, I did all of those things. I didn't start a podcast for my brokerage while we were running it, because podcast really wasn't a big thing back then. But I did write articles for my own blog. I wrote articles for other industry magazines. I was interviewed by other people in the industry. So, we had customer testimonials, we had agent testimonials, we had carrier testimonials that talk not only about the company, about me personally. So those are a few things that you can do to try to help build your credibility and establish yourself as an expert in your niche. But that's a great question. Thank you for asking. I'm just scrolling through questions, so just give me a minute. All right, so here's a question from Jordy. I know there are some sales scripts in Freight Broker Bootcamp. In my online training program, we offer sales. We have sales scripts as a bonus for the people that are platinum members. But after the cold call, when I call back, what do I tell them to persuade them to tender me the first load? All right. First of all, there is no magic script. There is no magic answer to this. Here's what I can tell you. The challenge that you have, the number one reason why shippers do not buy from brokers, the number one reason why any buyer does not buy from a seller is fear and trust. So here's what their fear is that, it's the devil I know versus the devil I don't. Even if the provider that they have right now is not perfect and is not ideal and is not supporting them the way they believe they should be supported, in many cases, they will stay with that provider rather than switching to a new provider, because again, it's the devil I know versus the devil I don't. It could always be worse. So what it comes down to, the number one reason why shippers don't buy from brokers is fear. It's fear of the unknown. It's fear of what might happen if they tender them a load. What you have to understand is, let's say you're a shipping manager working for XYZ manufacturing company, and you bring on a new broker, and that new broker drops the load, blows it, and now the receiver that was about to get that product your customer, the manufacturer's customer, calls up and complains because the load is delayed. And then one of the executives or managers from the manufacturer is going to call down to shipping and talk to that shipping manager. And is going to say, well, what happened? And he's going to say, well, I brought on a new broker and they miss the pickup or they miss the delivery or they drop the load or whatever the case may be. What do you think that's going to do to that shipping manager? So that manager, and this has all happened before, they slap them on the wrist and they say, don't do that again, right? So they feel pain because they made a decision to bring on a new vendor, and all of a sudden, it came back and bit them. So the number one obstacle you have to overcome in sales is fear. It's fear of the unknown. So the more certainty that you can create in that shipper's mind, the better off you can be. Things that I just talked about, demonstrating your expertise, having customer testimonials, developing a strong relationship and rapport with them. Those are all things. There is no magic script. There's no, if I had it, I would give it to you, willingly give it to you, that there was these magic words where I could charm people like a snake charmer into just giving you freight, but it doesn't exist. It doesn't work that way. It's about focusing on relationships, demonstrating your expertise, building credibility, overcoming the fear of doing business with you. If at the point that they believe that there is less fear than there is benefit, they'll buy. If they think that there's more fear than there is benefit, they won't buy. So I hope that helps. All right, so here's a question. Becoming an independent freight broker agent, do you have to have any insurance, or does the freight broker have all the liability on themselves? All right, so as a general rule, the freight broker is going to have their own general liability. They're going to have their own insurance, and that will cover your transaction, okay? Because that's part of your contract. They're assuming the liability of that transaction. But as an agent, it's not a bad option to have your own general liability policy. Number one, it's very inexpensive. And number two, what you have to understand, insurance is really about what you're paying for. When you're paying for insurance is you're paying for legal defense, because in the event that you were ever named in a lawsuit or some sort of a claim, that insurance company is going to help defend you from that claim. That is their job, right? And if found liable, then they're going to pay the claim minus whatever deductible or clauses you have in there. So it's probably not a bad idea, if you can afford the general liability insurance, to have insurance as a freight agent. The other thing that you might consider, and this definitely, you do not need this as a startup, is you may want to consider errors and omissions insurance, E&O. And that would help protect you and defend you in the event that you made some sort of an error and caused some sort of damage. That's an E&O insurance, which is different than general liability. So neither of those are required as a freight agent. Most of that would fall under the freight broker that you're working under. But if you have the resources and you want to add another layer of protection to your business, both of those policies are probably a good idea down the road. So hope that helps. Ashanti asks, is becoming a dispatcher a good way to enter the industry before becoming an agent? If you want to work as a dispatcher for a carrier, you want to work as a dispatcher inside of a brokerage, or you want to work in some sort of a lateral type of capacity as a shipping manager and receiving, all that stuff is going to help. I think any of that knowledge and any of that experience is going to benefit you. But what you have to understand is those jobs are totally different, right? Being a dispatcher is not being a broker. It's very different. There are some crossovers, right? Talking to carriers, negotiating rates, dispatching, those sorts of things. But on the sales and marketing side, right? There is none of that, right? As a dispatcher, you're really not doing any of that. So I do think that those can benefit you and help you along the way because it will educate you about the industry. No different than being a truck driver, right? Being a truck driver and being a freight broker are very different things, but having the knowledge that a truck driver has about different types of equipment and nuances when it comes to loading and unloading and appointments and dealing with shippers and dealing with delays and dealing with claims and all those sorts of things, those nuances that a driver has are highly beneficial if they ever want to become a freight broker, but they're still going to have to learn a bunch of other skills in order to be a successful freight broker, right? So they're going to have to expand that knowledge, and that's part of what Freight Broker Bootcamp does, right? So, all right. So listen, I want to turn it back on you guys real quick because I've answered a bunch of questions for you. Now I want you to answer a question for me. For those of you that are sitting on the fence, I'm curious. I just want to understand what the mindset is here. You know, we're at the beginning of 2021 and everybody's excited about starting a new business and making change and doing the things that they didn't do last year. So here's my question to you. If you're thinking about becoming a freight broker or freight agent, you're curious about becoming a freight broker or freight agent, share with me in the chat box, reply back. What's the number one reason why you have not enrolled in Freight Broker Bootcamp, in my Freight Broker Bootcamp training? Help me to understand that. Reply. Now, this is obviously only for people who haven't yet enrolled in the program. But if you're listening to this live, or you've listened to past lives, or you've watched my YouTube videos, or you've read my blog content, and you've gotten all that value for free, what's the biggest reason why you have not enrolled in my Freight Broker Bootcamp online training program? Hit the chat box while I grab a drink real quick. Let me know what are some of the things that are holding you back or preventing you from joining Freight Broker Bootcamp. I'd love to hear your feedback. And we'll get rid of okay, so E-Man says no money for training. Okay, so I understand financially. It can be a challenge. I totally get that. We'll be here a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road. If it takes you a short period of time to save up that money. Again, my gold membership is a 1-year unlimited access, unlimited support membership. It's $185 one time. It's not a monthly fee. It's one time. Okay. If you want to become a platinum lifetime member with lifetime support, it's $389 one time. There's no recurring fees, no recurring charges, no monthly charges, no annual charges, none of that. Okay. So it is already positioned as one of the most cost-effective and comprehensive online training programs. So, I totally understand that's more of a condition. You don't have the money right now. We just got through the holidays and I can totally appreciate that. You probably drained your bank account buying gifts for people. And so I totally get that, but just know that we are very cost effective. You can check that out again at freightbrokerbootcamp.com. All right. Money. So same sort of thing. So what other questions, what other concerns do you guys have that are holding you back, right? What's holding you back from, let's see. All right. So here's a question. Question is, would that apply to the office or per individual? So Matthew Linder asks, does the membership apply to your entire office or per individual? No, it's an individual license. It wouldn't be fair if you had to buy one license and you could have 10 or 20 or 50 people. That's against our copyright, right? And against our intellectual property. So it's per user. The membership is on a user basis. So if you are a solo broker, you need one membership. If you want 10 people to get access to that training, then 10 different people to get access to that training, then it would be a membership per person. But good question. Thanks for asking. Thanks for clarifying, because people do ask that question quite often. I should probably clarify that in the marketing materials. Thank you, Misha. Appreciate the kind words. Thank you so much. A couple of the biggest things I'm hearing is money, right? Paycheck to paycheck. All right. So here's a question. I am not on the fence. I took the course in September, paying $1,000. What is this? I lost it. Hold on. All right, so here's a question. What comes with your package? Is this a certified program? Okay, so Megan Cole asked this question. Understand something. To become a freight broker, there is no certification, there is no test, there is no requirement from a testing or certification perspective to become a licensed freight broker. None of that. There are people out there that are peddling that are positioning it that way, that if you become a certified in their program, you're automatically going to get your freight broker authority. That's not true. The only way to get your freight broker authority is you have to apply to the FMCSA, you have to submit an application, you have to get your freight broker bond, you have to get your BOC3, and you have to get your UCR. We walk through all that in our training. You don't need our training to necessarily do that. That's a small part of our training, but we do include that. So there is no certification that's required in order to become a freight broker. And there definitely is no certification in order to become a freight agent. So there is no licensing. Unlike becoming a cosmetologist or a hairstylist or a real estate agent or an insurance agent, those all have tests and requirements that you have to do and even have continuing education in order to maintain your license. Freight brokers do not have that. It's wide open, right? So that's one of the biggest benefits of starting a freight brokerage. You don't have all that extra. You don't need a college degree. You don't even need to have graduated from high school. So good question. Thank you, Megan. All right. So I appreciate that. I'm going to go back through some of those answers. I'm going to answer some more of your guys' questions. Hit me up with some more questions in the chat box. If we've already passed through them, put your question back into the feed, resubmit the question. I'd like to continue answering your questions. I'm going to spend probably another 10 minutes or so on Q&A. I'll try to get through as many questions as I can. So I'm looking for questions here. All right, so here's a question. Jamie Matt asks, should I work on my credit score before becoming a freight broker? Well, it's probably not a bad idea to pull your credit report and to check your credit, because as you may or may not know, when you get your bond, in order to get your freight broker surety bond, they are going to run your credit. And that is a primary component of how they judge whether you are going to, number one, qualify for a surety bond, and number two, the cost of your surety bond. So it's probably not a bad idea to run credit on yourself, right? Go to Equifax or go to Credit Karma or go to one of these credit places. I don't have any particular one that I would suggest. Run your credit and check your credit. Now, if you have low credit, under 600 credit score, you know one of two things. Either you're going to get denied for the surety bond, or it's going to be very expensive. In that case, the alternative is to become an agent, which I highly recommend anyway. My average agent made over $107,000 the last year I had my brokerage. They worked from home. I had agents that made over $100,000 a month. In 1 month, they made over $100,000 in commissions. Now, I'm not promising that's going to happen with you, and that the likelihood of that happening with you is very small, but other people have done it. And I'm just disclaiming, and I want you to understand, I'm not promising you that. But number one, if you do want to become an agent, I want you to understand it's a very viable option if you don't have good credit. Now, if you do have a little bit better credit and you've got a 650 or 700 or a 750 or an 800 credit score, it's not a function of whether you're going to get approved for a surety bond. It's a function of the cost, right? Typically, freight broker bonds cost somewhere between 2 and 5% of the bond cost, right? So if you've got a $75,000 bond, 2% of that is $1,500. 5% of that, I think, is like $3,750. That's an annual cost for your surety bond. So it's probably not a bad idea to build your credit. But in the meantime, as you're building your credit, become a freight agent. Start your freight agency, because your credit's not going to build overnight. You're not going to change your credit score substantially in most cases for at least 6 to 12 months, right? Your credit score will go down very fast, but it doesn't go up very fast, right? So in the meantime, start building your book of business, start building your business as an agent. And then later, if you choose to spin off as a freight broker and go get your own authority later, then you can always do that. But now you've already got your customers, you've got positive cash flow, you've got a real business, okay? And you're not a startup anymore. So that would be my suggestion, Jamie. Good question. All right. So Paul Hayes asked, trying to figure out how to get my number to be able to negotiate with customers. There's 3 ways to get rates. Okay. There's 3 primary ways that you can generate rates. One is you can use the rating tools that are built within the load boards, like the DAT and the truck stop. They have rating tools that are built in there that will give you market data about the going rates in almost any given lane based on any given different type of equipment. Okay. So there's data there that you can use. You can gather it based on the equipment in the lane, and you can understand what is the cost of a truck. What are shippers paying in those lanes? It's going to give you some data on that. That is very helpful. The second thing you can do is you can use a lane history. So if I had a load moving from Boston to Chicago and it was a van load, I could go into the load boards. I could do a search on van trucks, the history of van trucks that have been posted between Boston and Chicago over the last 30, 60, 90 days. It'll give me a list of carriers and their names and phone numbers. I can then call those carriers. It'll even tell me how many times they've posted their truck in a lot of cases in that lane. And the ones that have posted their truck a lot of times in that lane, you can now call them and negotiate a rate, try to get a conversation going about what the going rate is, and you can gather data that way. The third way you can do it is by posting a live load, right? So you can post a load from, if I posted a load right now from Boston to Chicago, my phone would go crazy, right? I'd probably get, in most cases, that type of lane from the Northeast to the Midwest is very popular. So, I might get 20 or 30 phone calls in an hour or less, right? I could also gather data that way. Now, some people don't agree with that, but if I'm trying to understand and starting to develop data around lanes, particularly if these are going to be lanes that I'm going to be running on a regular basis, that type of process can be very valuable. So those are 3 strategies, 3 ways that you can gather rating data. Now, that's as far as negotiating with your customers. Again, your customers, there's a couple different ways you're going to work with customers. Are going to sometimes try to tell you the rates and make you confine you to their rates. They'll call you up and say, hey, we've got a load from A to B. It pays $1,500. That doesn't mean you have to accept that load at $1,500. In most cases, they're going to try to lowball you, or sometimes they're going to try to use a carrier rate to negotiate down. What you will do is you will go gather that intelligence, and you will, before you accept that load, you will make sure that, number one, you can cover that load with a high level of service with a good carrier. And you'll also make sure that there's a profit margin in there. If, for example, that the rate, you won't be able to make any money and cover it at $1,500 and you need $1,650, you can then go back to them and you can negotiate that rate using the data, saying, listen, this is the spot market where we are today. 3 months ago, we could move this for $1,500. But today, the spot market, based on where we are today, capacity, the number of trucks to the number of loads, because everything's driven by supply and demand. The spot market rate today is $1,650. If you need me to pick that up tomorrow, I can gladly do that for you. Just send me over a tender and I'll do that. Right. So you want to give them real live information, right? So not every shipper that gives you a rate is going to be telling the truth, right? Or they're giving their version of the truth. Don't feel bad about going back and negotiating rates. Rarely, if ever, did I accept a shipper's rate at face value. I did my research, and in most cases, I almost always had to raise that rate and then sell the value of why I was worth an extra $50 or $100 or $200 over the rate that they had stated, right? That's what comes into sales. That's where you've developed that relationship, you've developed that rapport, you've developed that trust, you've developed that, that ability to have that conversation and for them to understand the value that you provide, right? So when I always talked about this, I'd say, listen, there's brokers that quote a lot of rates, right? And some people are really focused on being the cheapest. But the fact is, cheapest is rarely, if ever, synonymous with the best. Here's why I quote this rate, because this rate doesn't come up with me calling you back and saying I need more money later or I couldn't cover the load. This rate comes with a truck, right? This rate, if you give me this load, 99.9% of the time, I am going to cover that load, pick it up on time in good condition, and make sure it gets delivered with no problems. That's what you buy by giving me an extra $100 on that lane. So that's an example of the type of conversation you might have. Hope that helps, Paul. Well, here's a good question. If a company asks me for information, what do I send them? Well, ask them what they want. The best way to answer a question is to clarify, right? That question is this: what exactly are you looking for? I'd like to provide you some rates on some of the lanes that are coming up in the next week or two. Would that work? See how easy that is? They'd say, sure, here, quote this lane. Or they say, well, can you just send me over your authority? Can you send me over your freight broker authority and your insurance? Okay, great. I'll send over my freight broker authority and insurance. Don't try to guess what they want, and don't overgive. You don't want to send a document that has 50 pages in it because, number one, they're never going to read it. All right. So the way to answer that question is the same way as I answer any other questions. If it's vague and you aren't quite sure, ask a follow-up question. All right, so let me ask you a question. What exactly are you looking for? Well, we'd like to see a copy of your authority and your insurance. Great. I'll send that over to you right away. Let me ask you this. Would it be okay if I provided you some rates and some quotes on some of your more popular lanes or lanes that are coming up in the next week or two? I'd love to try to help and support you there and see exactly, what the capacity looks like and what rates look like today and throughout this next week to try to help support you. Great. All right. Yeah, we've got a lane coming up XYZ. That's great. Now you've not only sent them that information, you've gathered some sales intelligence on their lanes, and now you are going to have a follow-up conversation because you're going to be quoting them on those lanes, right? So that's an example of how to turn that question around. I hope that helps. All right. Couple last questions, then I'm going to wrap it up for today. Adrian, master broker certification is nothing. It's a marketing ploy by another company that does training out there. And they might be a good company. I'm not going to say one way or the other, but there is no certification that is required to become a freight broker or freight agent. If you take my course and you request a certificate of completion at the end, we will provide that for you. It's not a problem. You enroll, you take the course, we'll provide you a certificate of completion if that helps you in some way. But there is no certification, there is no test, there is no requirement like that to become a freight broker or a freight agent. It's misleading in a lot of ways, right? So it's very misleading, and I don't agree with it. Oh, here's a question I get every day. What's the best way to find new customers? Well, it's called sales, right? I'm not being cheeky. I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm not trying to be, mean, but it's sales, right? The difference between being a truck driver and a dispatcher and a broker is called sales. So selling and learning and developing your skills in and around sales, that involves communications. That involves negotiations. That involves, cold calling. That involves, cold emailing. That involves following up. That involves using sales technology like CRMs to track your leads and to schedule your follow-ups. It's called sales. So there is no best way. Some people like cold calling, and they are very good at it, and they're very effective at it, and they get clients on a regular basis. I have students from my course that hit me up every week that say, hey, I just got a new client. I cold called and got this new client. I've got other students who like to use social media and what I call social selling, like LinkedIn, who will use LinkedIn as a strategy. I even have clients who do paid advertisements on Google, where they do paid advertising. I've had past students and clients that have done paid advertising on Google where they generate inbound leads from clients, from prospective shippers, and then they talk to them on the phone and they develop a relationship and they provide a quote and they get clients that way. So there's a variety of different ways you can do it, right? Leads and customers is typically broken into two. There's outbound, which is where you're doing outreach, right? Whether that be face-to-face, door knocking, whether that be cold calling, whether that be social media, whether that be cold email, things of that nature. And then there's inbound. Inbound is more paid advertising or search engine optimization, where you get ranked by a search engine for different content, and then a shipper finds that and requests more information. So it definitely breaks down to inbound and outbound. Most new brokers focus on outbound because that's the skill that's the easiest to develop and the quickest to turn around customers. So most brokers use cold calling as a way to generate new leads and new clients. Hope that answers your question. Thanks, Vova. Shay Lee asked, do you offer a course for already established brokers? Freight Broker Bootcamp is designed for more startups. Now, there is some stuff in there that would benefit an established broker. In particular, some of the sales training and some of the marketing related stuff and the support associated with being able to ask questions along the way. But I'm in the process of putting together what I'm calling my Freight Broker Sales Accelerator program. This is an advanced sales training program. So this is, it's that piece of my brain around sales and everything that I've learned, all the mistakes I've made, all the things that I've used and leveraged to close deals in a variety of different industries, logistics being one of them, right? Because I've had multiple businesses in different industries. And so, yeah, that sales training is something I'm putting together. I'm hoping to release that on a limited basis in January, right? This month at some point, I'm hoping to release that. That would be more geared towards established brokers. New brokers could take it as well, right? Because you could take advanced training, but that would be much more beneficial to existing brokers and agents who have already got a small book of business and they're looking to accelerate their growth, or they're looking to develop their skills in sales. That's going to be a completely separate course from Freight Broker Bootcamp because it's a totally different audience, right? So I hope that helps. But thank you for the question, Shay Lee. If you want to make sure you get notified of that, obviously make sure you follow me on Facebook, YouTube, and get on my email list because I will be announcing it, but I'm thinking about limiting it. This first one, I'm going to limit it to probably 50 students. I'm probably going to limit it to 50 students. So, and I'll be handpicking those students because I want to make sure that it's a great experience for everybody. And then later on, we'll eventually open it up, but that's going to be in January. So stay tuned for that. Anybody who's curious about it, it's going to be called my Freight Broker Sales Accelerator Program. I'm excited about it. I've been asked to do it for years. I've just pushed it off because I've been busy with other projects, but now I've committed to doing it. So stay tuned for that. Good question. Thank you, Shay. Yeah. So here's a question from James Baxter. Can you start a broker or broker agent while working full-time job? I currently work full-time, 12-hour rotation shifts. You can do a freight broker or freight agency part-time, but I tell everybody you can't do it in your spare time, right? The big qualifier that you will need is you will need to be able to make and take phone calls to shippers and carriers during normal business hours, which is typically somewhere between 8 and 5 p.m. Now, you don't need to be available for all of those hours, but you are going to need the ability to make and take phone calls during those hours. You're going to need to be able to prospect shippers. So if you only have availability from 8 to 10 in the morning, you need to be able to prospect shippers during that time frame in order to start getting your customers. If you can only do it from 1 to 5 in the afternoon, then you're still in that wheelhouse. You're still able to do it part-time, a couple hours a day, 3 hours a day, 5 hours a day. But what I will tell you is if you don't have availability during the daytime to do that, it's going to be challenging. It's going to be very challenging. And it's going to be very difficult, right? So my suggestion is if you have availability during normal business hours between 8 and 5, when most shippers are available, most carriers are available, and most freight picks up and delivers, Even if you've only got a couple of hour window every day, you can start this part-time. But of course, it's going to be a little bit slower boat to China. But ultimately, if you can get 1 or 2 shippers part-time, that could replace your full-time income and allow you to go full-time. And I think that would be a great strategy for someone like yourself, as long as you can make the commitment. So here's a question, and this is going to be one of the final questions here. David Archie asks, do freight brokers get paid weekly, monthly? Well, if you are a licensed freight broker, depending upon your business, you can get paid every single day. If I invoice a shipper today, and then they have 30 days to pay that invoice, and then I invoice a shipper tomorrow and they have 30 days to pay that invoice, it depends on how many loads you're moving. So typically a shipper is going to pay you somewhere between 30 and 45 days. So it depends upon how many loads you can deliver on a daily basis or a weekly basis, and how many loads you can invoice on a daily and weekly basis. That's going to determine how often you get paid. Now, when I sold my brokerage, we were doing hundreds of loads per day. So we were also sending out hundreds of invoices per day, right? And so ultimately we were getting hundreds of checks per day, right? But we've been in business for a significant amount of time. I think by that time we'd been in business for 13 years. So the more loads you move, the more invoices you send, the more frequently you're going to get paid. If you are an independent freight broker. Now, as a freight agent, that may have been what you were asking, but if you're a freight agent, typically freight agents are going to get paid weekly or bi-weekly by the broker. That's what I see in most cases. You'll get paid weekly or bi-weekly based upon what has invoiced for your shipper. They typically are not going to make you wait until the shipper pays. They'll advance you that commission. And then if the shipper doesn't pay, they charge that back, of course, because they didn't get paid. But agents get paid based on invoicing. Freight brokers get paid on invoices that they send out, and freight agents get paid weekly or bi-weekly based on invoices that are sent by the broker to their shipper. So hope that's not confusing. Hope that helps. All right, guys, listen. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, make sure you check out freightbrokerbootcamp.com. We've trained over 8,000 students, been in business for over a decade, right? We have a 60-day, 100% money back guarantee. If you're not happy for any reason, just send us an email. We'll refund your money. We don't want your money if you're not happy, right? And so I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you guys are ready for a prosperous, fun, exciting 2021. I really appreciate you being here. I love doing these Q&As. I will try to come back in throughout the week and answer additional questions in the thread, whether that be on YouTube or whether that be on Facebook. So feel free to add your questions. Continue to add your questions to the stream. I will try to come back and answer those questions. A lot of times I use your questions as future content for Freight Broker Bootcamp lives. So if you come up with a really good question or a topic, I will use it in a future live. I have a whole list of them. Again, congratulations on making it and surviving 2020. 2021 is going to be a great year. I'm excited to help you launch your own freight brokerage or freight agency. If you guys need any help, make sure, if you have other questions, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. I have a very popular playlist on there. It's called Freight Broker Freight Agent Q&A. I think there's over 40 or 50 questions in that playlist, which are questions that I get all the time. Some of the questions I already answered today and tons of other questions. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel and click that bell to get notified. The price of admission, once again, is liking this stream. Like it right now. Hit that like button. Don't be afraid. Hit the like button and then share the stream. Share it with others so that others can benefit from this training and information as well. So hope you guys have an awesome day, and we'll talk soon.